On my birthday, my parents handed me a trash bag of my things and said, "Good luck." I left without a word. 10 years later, they opened the paper to see my face above the headline, "Local orphan becomes millionaire, donates 70% fortune to abandoned kids." They didn't even bother to wait until the morning. It was just past midnight. Technically my birthday, if you want to get literal about it. No cake, no candles, no tradition, no soft smiles or wrapped boxes. Just the sound of plastic scraping against the hardwood floor as my father dragged a black trash bag from the hallway and dropped it by the front door like a sack of rotting meat. I remember the way the bag sagged, overstuffed with my life crammed into wrinkles and folds, shirts balled up, mismatched socks, a cracked phone charger, the sneakers with the split sole I used to wear to school when I still believed that maybe they cared a little. He didn't say much, just a shrug, a dry mouth exhaling 2 words, as casual as a cough. Good luck. My mother stayed seated at the kitchen table, lit by the dirty overhead bulb that made her skin look jaundiced. She didn't look up. Her hands were wrapped around a chipped mug, not even pretending to feel sorry. Her silence didn't cut like a knife. Knives are personal, precise. This was more like being run over slowly by something heavy and indifferent, the emotional equivalent of being flattened by a moving truck without a driver. I didn't ask why. I knew the answer. I'd known it for years, written in cold dinners, ignored birthdays, and 1,000 closed doors behind me. They hadn't hit me. They didn't need to. Neglect is quieter than bruises, but it spreads deeper. I didn't scream, didn't cry. No confrontation, no final plea. They didn't deserve a performance. I picked up the bag, looped the thin plastic around my wrist, and walked out barefoot, wearing a hoodie too thin for the wind and sweatpants that clung to my knees from overuse. My feet slapped the porch steps like wet cloth as I descended. The door didn't slam shut behind me. They didn't care enough to shut it at all, just left it swinging like an afterthought. It was 38 degrees outside. I remember that exactly because I spent that night huddled under a broken bus shelter downtown, my breath fogging the plexiglass, my fingers curled around a sandwich someone had thrown in a paper bag near the trash. Peanut butter, no jelly, but it might as well have been a feast. I chewed slowly, like I didn't know if there would be food again the next day, because I didn't. Over the next few months, I learned that silence is currency. Pity gets you short-term help, but quiet resilience makes people pay attention. I didn't beg. I offered. My back, my hands, my time. I washed dishes for $2 under the table. I swept floors. I cleaned gutters. I volunteered at a soup kitchen just to stay near food. At night, I slept wherever I could. Church pews, unlocked laundry rooms, once behind a boarded-up bodega where rats ran across my shins but didn't bite. I read books that people left behind at bus stops, paperbacks with cracked spines and pages stained with unknown liquids. I memorized job ads, looked up every word I didn't understand, and studied every corner of every city street I walked. By 17, I'd saved enough to rent half a basement room with a broken lock and no window. The woman upstairs, Marla, didn't ask questions. She let me use her Wi-Fi if I helped her carry groceries and replace the batteries in her smoke alarms. I found a GED prep center and signed up, passed with a perfect score on the first try. The proctor stared at me like I cheated. I didn't bother correcting her. I worked nights, packaging, janitorial, delivery. If it paid, I took it. I filed tax returns. I saved everything. I didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't make friends. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew what happened when you relied on people. Eventually, they threw you out with a trash bag of your own clothes and called it growing up. At 19, I taught myself to code from an old laptop that overheated every 40 minutes. I watched free courses until my eyes burned, then rewired the fan using scrap from a thrift store printer and posted my first freelance job listings online. Data scraping, back-end optimization, small contracts at first, then bigger ones. I kept my rates low, delivered early, and never missed a deadline. Reputation built faster than trust. By 21, I had 3 full-time clients and a name in forums that meant something. I founded my own digital infrastructure startup using a fake address and a borrowed desk in a shared office I accessed with a laminated ID card I printed myself. I registered the company with my GED, a prepaid debit card, and a bank account with just under $7,000. I pitched a data integration tool that didn't exist yet and then stayed awake for 92 hours to build it from scratch. The client loved it. Paid in crypto. I converted it to fiat the same day, invested half, and used the rest to hire 2 freelancers who lived in countries where $500 bought them a month of loyalty. My company grew in silence. No press, no flashy social media, no face attached. Just results. And money. More than I knew how to spend. I bought property under shell names, automated everything I could, and kept my real identity buried beneath 6 layers of pseudonyms and corporate masks. My name was dust in the digital wind. Untraceable, unreadable, until the article. That morning started like any other. I opened my inbox. Requests. Proposals. A feature offer from a mid-tier tech magazine that had finally traced my company's roots back to me after 3 years of digging. I declined the interview, but the article ran anyway. Front page. Local orphan builds tech empire. The headline was inaccurate. I wasn't an orphan, not legally, but nobody questioned it. The writer had found an old photo of me from a city shelter taken during intake at 15. I was half asleep, sunburnt, and staring dead ahead like I could see through the camera and into the future. I didn't care about the exposure. What struck me was the timing. It was the week before my 28th birthday, and I'd been planning something. The donation wasn't spontaneous. It had been in the works for 2 years. 70% of my fortune wired into a trust managed by lawyers with iron stomachs and no allegiances. The fund would open schools, shelters, skill centers, libraries, and most importantly, offer legal protection and identity support for kids dumped by the system or their parents without so much as a note. I wrote the mission statement myself. No child is disposable. Every abandoned soul becomes a storm. The headline dropped 3 days after the transfer. Local orphan becomes millionaire, donates 70% of fortune to abandoned kids. The paper hit the city before dawn. It was everywhere, on coffee tables, commuter trains, newsstands, breakfast diners, office break rooms. And in one very specific kitchen, where a man and woman in their late 50s, both graying at the temples, sat across from each other under that same greasy bulb that used to flicker above a silent table. My mother, still clutching the same chipped mug, choked on her first sip. My father squinted at the paper, mouth half open, reading the name 3 times before it clicked. They didn't cry. They didn't call. They didn't even apologize, because that would mean admitting they had something to do with who I became. But I wasn't waiting for their call. I never had, because I wasn't their mistake. I was the echo of every slammed door, the reply to every shrug, the fire they tried to stomp out with indifference. The week following the headline wasn't quiet. It never is when money meets sentiment. People came crawling out of corners I didn't know existed. Emails flooded in, journalists begging for interviews, nonprofits asking for follow-ups, think tanks wanting quotes, publicists offering to clean up my image in case the orphan title stirred controversy. But I hadn't lied. What do you call someone who's discarded with the casualness of trash, told to find their own way in a world where every door is locked? The legal definition didn't matter. Society had already decided what I was, and I wasn't correcting them. The first television crew showed up outside the headquarters I'd never visited in person. I watched from a different city, one I didn't live in, but stayed just long enough to monitor reactions. My lawyer sent cease and desists to the most aggressive media outlets trying to expose where I lived. A few got too close and were handled through the proper channels. I didn't hide because I was scared. I just valued the control. Letting anyone into my personal life felt like giving power back to the same system that once ignored me. My team managed the press with precision. They put out a single official statement, short and controlled. This donation is not about recognition. It's about restoration. Children deserve more than survival. No interviews, no follow-ups. Nothing extra. I wasn't a personality. I was a statement that couldn't be erased. But the thing about silence is, it echoes, and the echo found its way to them. They lived in the same house, same peeling paint, same dying garden, same rusting car in the driveway with the same dent in the bumper from a fender bender I took the blame for when I was 14. They hadn't moved, not because of nostalgia, but because they couldn't afford to. Financially, they were stagnant. No promotions, no wins, just years of surviving paycheck to paycheck, blaming bad luck for their own apathy. My mother still worked part-time at the supermarket deli. My father bounced between under-the-table construction gigs and seasonal warehouse shifts. No savings, no pensions, just faded dreams and mounting regret. I didn't feel pity. That would imply they deserved it. What I felt was calculation. Cold, clean, and surgical. So I gave them a visit. Not in person. That would have given them too much. Instead, I sent a package. A single white envelope with no return address. Inside it was a photograph. Me, dressed in a tailored black jacket, standing in front of a building with the name Horizon House etched into the glass. The first of the youth centers I'd funded. Behind me, a line of kids stood smiling. Real smiles, not the kind you force for a camera. Each one had a name, a bed, a future. I flipped the photo before sealing it and wrote 6 words in clean block letters with a black pen. You threw out the wrong one. No signature, no address, no request, just truth. I never confirmed they received it, but I knew. 2 days later, my mother tried to call me from a number that hadn't touched my phone in over a decade. She didn't even have my current number, but someone she knew did, and she begged them to pass it on. The voicemail was breathless, desperate, laced with guilt too late to matter. I didn't respond. Letting her speak into silence was more effective than anything I could have said. Some wounds scream louder without words. The money didn't stop at Horizon House. Over the next 6 months, I expanded. I created 5 more centers across the state, each equipped with education programs, in-house therapists, legal advisors, tech training labs, and safe transport. I hired people who had walked the edge, ex-foster kids, former runaways, survivors who understood without needing to ask questions. The rule was simple. No preaching, no pity, just progress. I kept working in the background. Never let the media get a fresh photo. Never allowed a live interview. I made sure my name meant something. But my face stayed just another shadow in the room. I wasn't interested in celebrity. I was building something immune to applause. But not everyone appreciated it. The backlash started in whispers. Certain political groups criticized the glorification of victimhood. Said I was teaching kids to expect handouts instead of hard lessons. One op-ed even claimed I was promoting abandonment, implying that my success was a dangerous example, that I made being thrown away look too glamorous. Another article suggested I fabricated the entire story for tax breaks, citing the lack of official orphan status. I didn't fight it publicly. I fought it legally. Every defamatory line cost them. Every falsehood bled through their legal departments like ink in water. I never made statements. I made examples. But something happened I hadn't prepared for. One of the kids from Horizon House, 17, quiet, brilliant, wrote an essay for a local scholarship contest. The title was, "The Day the World Changed Without Me Asking." In it, he talked about the moment he walked into the center, expecting to be ignored, preparing to be shuffled from one waiting room to another like always. But someone met him at the door, shook his hand, and called him by name. He'd never been called by his name with respect before. Only threats, roll calls, or corrections. The essay went viral. The story became part of a national conversation about youth abandonment, and suddenly, my name was back on the front page again. Not as a businessman, as a symbol. I hated it. Because symbols get picked apart. They become metaphors, props, rally cries. They lose their shape. And I hadn't done this to be anyone's inspiration. I'd done it because no one had done it for me. Because I remembered the way cold concrete felt on my back when I slept outside a laundromat, and I swore nobody should have to feel that kind of invisibility. Still, the exposure forced my hand. So I appeared. One time. I rented a small auditorium under a nonprofit name, invited donors, kids, volunteers, and a select few reporters. The room fit 300 people. I walked in wearing a plain suit, no tie, no entourage. I stood under white lighting, no dramatics, no video montages, just a podium and a microphone. I told the truth. I told them that pain wasn't a personality, but it was a tool. That I didn't find success. I built it because I had no other choice. That the system didn't fail me because it wasn't broken. It was working exactly the way it was designed to. I told them that the worst thing you can do to a child isn't hit them. It's to look at them and see nothing. The applause meant nothing. The cameras were already off when I left through the side exit and disappeared into the rented car waiting a block away. No interviews, no autographs, just motion. I never returned to that auditorium. But back home, the silence was breaking. My parents showed up at Horizon House, not together, Separate visits, days apart. My father came first, wore a shirt I recognized. Used to be mine, oversized, faded print on the chest. He looked smaller than I remembered. Asked the receptionist if he could speak to the director. Didn't say my name, just called me the founder. Said he was an old family friend. He didn't make it past the lobby. Security was trained. Polite, calm, but firm. No appointments, no access. He left a note. Crumpled, handwritten, smelled like cigarettes. Said he was proud of me. Said he made mistakes. Asked if we could talk. I burned it. 3 days later, my mother appeared. No note, no excuses. She just stood outside the gate, holding a small box wrapped in a paper towel like a gift. A volunteer tried to take it. She refused, said it was for me only. Inside the box were photos, old ones. Me as a toddler, me at school, me at birthdays I didn't remember. Behind the stack was a folded card. No writing on the front. Inside, a single line in her handwriting. We didn't know what to do with love. I didn't burn that. But I didn't reply either. Because this story wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about revenge. It was about architecture. I was rebuilding something from pieces no one else wanted, and I wasn't finished yet. The next year passed without incident. The news cycle moved on. Public attention drifted to newer scandals, fresh tragedies, viral distractions. I remained where I was, just out of frame, steering everything from behind the curtain. The network of youth centers expanded into 4 states. Legal protections tightened. Education programs became certification pipelines. I implemented housing transition systems for kids aging out, with employment placements lined up before they hit 18. I signed contracts, filed patents, and locked intellectual property under trust-owned entities. Everything I built would survive me. I didn't care about legacy in the way people romanticized it. My name didn't need to be on buildings. I didn't need statues, awards, or speeches. The only measure of impact that mattered to me was how many kids stopped looking over their shoulders. But something was still unfinished. I thought I had handled it all. Cut ties, buried the past, kept everything moving. Yet the longer I stayed successful, the louder the silence around my parents became. Not from them, but inside me. Their absence used to be a cold fact. Now it was a loose thread. I didn't want reconciliation. I just wanted clarity. So I went back. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't wear a suit, no press, no announcement. Just me in an old jacket, standing on the sidewalk outside the same house where it all began. The front steps still creaked. The porch light flickered faintly as if fighting the idea of being replaced. I hadn't set foot there since the night I was told, "Good luck," and handed my life in a plastic sack. They didn't know I was coming. The door opened after 3 knocks. My father stood there, older, thinner, face marked by time and things he wouldn't admit. He recognized me immediately but didn't speak. My mother appeared behind him, holding a dish towel. Her eyes locked on mine, but she said nothing either. I didn't ask if I could come in. I walked past them and into the living room. Same cracked leather couch, same stained rug, same photo frames, except none of them had changed. I was in none of them. I sat. They stayed standing. The silence stretched long enough to become a choice. Then I spoke. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm not here for comfort. I'm here because this is the last door I needed to close." They didn't interrupt. I kept going. "You made a decision 10 years ago. You threw me out, and you did it without remorse. You didn't check in. You didn't wonder if I was alive. You left me to figure it out or die trying. And I did figure it out. Not out of genius, not out of luck, but because pain forces clarity. You gave me nothing, and in doing so, gave me the blueprint for everything I built." My mother's hand trembled. She tried to speak, but I stopped her with a look. "This isn't your redemption arc. You don't get closure in the form of my forgiveness. You get to know that I survived you, that I did more for children I didn't know than you ever did for the one you raised, that I turned absence into infrastructure, silence into systems, and being unwanted into purpose." My father looked away. I stood up. "I'm leaving now. This house is just a place. I needed to see it one last time to prove it doesn't hold power anymore." I walked to the door, then paused. "There's nothing you can say. There's nothing I want from you. But you'll remember this moment. Not because of what I said, but because of what it means. You lost the only thing worth keeping, not because you were cruel, but because you were indifferent. I left without slamming the door. That night, I flew back to the city. A new center had just finished construction. This one had something different. A library built on the upper floor. It wasn't flashy, just rows of clean shelves, quiet lighting, and a wall of computers for kids who needed the digital world to dream bigger. The plaque at the entrance read, "In honor of those who started with nothing and still gave everything." I walked through it alone, running my hand along the edge of each desk, remembering the floor I once slept on, the books I read with a flashlight under my coat, the cold that shaped my will. I sat in one of the chairs and listened to the quiet. No sirens, no threats, just breathing, distant laughter, a door closing gently somewhere. The final piece was already in motion. Months ago, I'd set up a legal mechanism to transfer control of everything to a trust governed by a council of survivors, former runaways, abandoned youth, people who lived what I lived. No boardrooms, no rich investors looking to turn good into branding, just real people with memories etched into their decisions. Tonight, the transition finalized. I signed the last document, submitted the final override, and erased myself from the chain of authority. I would remain a name on a list of founders, but nothing more. From that point on, the system ran without me. I walked outside. It was raining, soft, steady, cleansing. I didn't run from it. I let it hit me. I had no appointments, no deadlines, no calls, no plans. I wasn't poor. I wasn't rich. I wasn't an orphan or a headline or a cautionary tale. I was just free. I checked into a quiet hotel under a false name, turned off my phone, and lay on a firm mattress in a room without memories. Sleep came fast, uninterrupted by the past. In the morning, I would leave the city. No destination, just distance. The world had taken everything from me once. I had given back more than it deserved, and now I was done.